Thank you, Vice Admiral Chauhan, and of course to Dr. Deswal and the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation. I thank you for the invitation. And of course, greetings and good wishes to my fellow panelists on this panel. Look, I have 7 minutes. Let me just lay out what I think are US continuities and where they sit as I speak to you today. First, we've had a 25-year turn towards the Indo-Pacific. Started in 2001 with the so-called concept of the East Asian littoral, and I quote, running from the Sea of Japan to the Bay of Bengal. That has gone to the other side of India now to encompass all of India. But I will just flag that I believe that we may be at the peak concept of the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific. Second, I think you are well aware that this great power competition over the last 22 plus years has been building. It has been evolutionary. It has now risen to more intensity. It's unlikely to change. There's both public, bipartisan, and a rough consensus in the US about great power competition, but it is not an uncontested consensus about great power competition. And I would refer you all to Senator Bernie Sanders' piece in Foreign Affairs this week on questioning whether a Cold War type competition is the right strategy for clearly some of China's quite unwelcome behaviors. The third continuity and question is the commitment of the United States to shift resources and attention to Asia. My own view of this in watching our defense and USAID and diplomatic outlays is there is a definite shift in progress. And as you well know, the last Defense Department report characterized the Indo-Pacific as the priority theater for the department. That does not necessarily mean that is a whole of government consensus about that, but it certainly means that there is in progress a shift in resources and attention. I think that continuity will continue. Fourth, I think there is an ongoing commitment in the part of the US to view Asia as part of its key interests in the commercial space. But I think the fundamental approaches of the US towards garnering the benefits of that commercial space are changing quite structurally and remain evolving. Examples, less interest in large multilateral and bilateral free trade arrangements, huge issues related to decoupling and technology controls, a lot of emphasis on supply chain risk and resilience. So how that bears on the way in which we access commercial opportunities, trade, investment, and other things are, I think, an ongoing process, though that the core continuity of access to the region is unchanged in our policies for about 200 years. Fifth, the continuity of privileging alliances and partnerships is intensifying rather than declining. And I make the argument that, in fact, notwithstanding, there are some complexities, but overall, the trajectory of US alliances and partnerships has improved over the last 20 plus years, has become more solid, more deep, more structural, and more integrated into American strategy. Sixth, I think there is a continued commitment to a multilateral presence in the region, primarily to keep the US in, promote US interests and values, not to cede the region to others, and help shape the geostrategic, geoeconomic, and geo-value environment. However, the fraying of ASEAN, the fraying of the globalization picture, most dominantly in terms of APEC, has created a new context for multilateralism. And my colleagues on the panel, I understand, will speak about Quad more deeply, but I would flag that Quad is a particular element in which you can see this frayed multilateralism being recalibrated. And so we'll just have to see how ASEAN-led multilateralism fares within this context of frayed regional multilateralism. Seventh and final continuity is American commitment to human rights and democracy in the region. I do not believe or see in my work with the Congress and others that this has changed in any fundamental way. As I would say, while there is a continuity and consistency and emphasis on human rights and democracy seen most recently in the cases of Myanmar and Thailand in the region, of course, the implementation will be tailored in practice, as it always is for any country. And I hardly see that as a fundamental shift, just a way in which it's calibrated to other interests and policies, as it always has been. So there's no fundamental change. So what does that mean for the regional structural environment if that's the US continuities and policies? I think I have identified in writing before, and I'll just reiterate and just flag them in my last 2 minutes. The four contests that I see in the region. There are four contests in the Indo-Pacific. Of course, these bleed into global affairs, but one is over power, one is over order. When I say order, I mean rules, norms, and institutions. The third contest is about relationships, and the final one is about a contest of narratives. My own 2 points about these contests is they are continually evolving because the international structure and international system is dynamic, evolving. But these four fundamental contests are being played out in a rather extraordinarily dynamic way. And I would flag two elements of them. First, that China and the US-China dynamic is a dominant and driving element of these contests, but by no means the only element. And sometimes we forget that while we're paying attention to the US-China dynamic and the balance of power, which is fundamental, and I'm not trying to diminish its importance, but I'm simply suggesting just below that, there's a Sino-Indian balance of power contest, Japan-China balance of power contest, a ROK-Japan balance of power contest, and this bleeds into the other contests as well, lesser or greater, depending on the issue at hand. So let me just conclude by saying that I think there are fundamental continuities in US policy. I think each of them is being buffeted by a set of very complex dynamics, and that the four structural contests in the Indo-Pacific are now playing their way out in an even more dynamic and difficult to predict way, given the COVID pandemic. I thank you for your time, Vice Admiral, and I hope I have followed your orders, sir, by sticking to the time allotted.